I am a true believer that for any art form to continue to be relevant, the works have to be revisited, reinterpreted, re-edited. From the beginning of my artistic directorship, a very important part of my vision was to make classical ballet relevant, to bring it to the audiences of today, to revisit those great stories and maybe put them in a context that represents the world we live in.
It is my first interpretation of a classical ballet, but working with classical bodies and definitely a classical story, it's definitely the first time, and it has changed the way I worked with the dancers who are playing Giselle. But more importantly for me is, has it changed them? So I think the piece is very much about belonging. And it can be a conceptual, it could be metaphorical, it could be in a person that you belong to, or it could be a place, or it could be a city, or, you know. So I think the piece is very much about belonging.
I believe that most classical stories survive because the theme is able to transcend time and place. And that's definitely the case with Giselle.
The original story of Giselle is very simple, really. It's a story of love, betrayal, revenge and forgiveness. So all of those absolutely classic. When you start to look at a story that is about injustice and separation, and you realize that that is the story of our times, there was a sense of urgency around telling this story in a way that is not didactic. We don't want to sit back, this is not a work of journalism, but emotive and effective in the sense that it reminds us that everything that we do at the moment is connected with these stories of inequality. It's the great prevailing problem in our lives, and it leads to everything, to our environmental problems, climate change issues.
Dance is one part of their identity, and it's the tool, the language, the vocabulary, the body is the tool to then tell your story. And especially within a classical company, I find it very challenging and interesting, because the tool becomes the thing that they're talking about. It's not the tools that we're showing, the form. It's about the actual story. The tools are just the way to tell that story. But the story is about you. I love it when I see people on stage, not actors or dancers. Yes.
So that was the beginning of the reason why I thought he would be perfect to do a bigger work. The reason why I wanted him specifically for Giselle was because, as I said, he's incredibly strong in narrative, but also because of the spirituality of the theme, that I believe he could find a different way of putting that on stage.
He doesn't come in and say, okay, you're doing this, you're doing that, end of story. It's really a discussion between his team, obviously a lot with him behind the scenes, but also before every rehearsal, we'll sit down, we'll talk about ideas or different inspirations, and he said himself that he wants us to be involved. This is a phenomenal time for us because usually as ballet dancers, we're told what to do, and we have to do that.
The way he works and the way he thinks is just so inspiring to the dancer, and he passes so much information to you that you're allowed to then express yourself within his movement.
Every day we seem to change things, add details and go into the story in a little bit more depth and really be able to go to the core and to the real depth of every movement and the meaning behind each movement. So it's completely different movement vocabulary for us. He's got such an amazing fusion of, you know, classical Indian and contemporary dance, which when he does it, it looks phenomenal.
is almost like filmmaking. So it's quite, it's just really opened my eyes to how to create a whole ballet. This has been really interesting, I think, for all of us, to hear his journey and how he changes things all the time, and he's constantly questioning where he's going. So it has been extremely intense mentally, physically, but I think it will really show on stage.
The concept that Akram had in mind, I really felt strong that I wanted to join in with that. He showed me some footage and I really loved it. Certain things already inspired music in my head, so I felt like, yeah, I could do that. I don't come from the classical world and I'm not formally trained. So for me, the way of composing is pretty much, I do play most of the stuff myself. And yeah, I could write, but I'm really slow, and it's a big job for an orchestra. So when I had the chat with Gavin and I realized that there was this beautiful man on the other side helping, ready to help, knowing that the schedule was super tight and we will have to work at night basically, I said, great, this is doable.
My entry into the process is to take Vince's music and transcribe his original computer envisaged design, sound design, write it down painstakingly, slowly, the old way, manuscript and a pencil, and then I have to then go through the rigorous task of orchestrating it. Now, orchestration is a very old-fashioned term for writing a piece of music for orchestra. We are not only using traditional instruments, but we're also using some very obscure or unusual percussion instruments and effects. For example, occasionally the orchestra have to be given to some pagan grunting and stamping and humming. So, you know, it really is, as much as it's challenging the dancers with their language, it's challenging the orchestra with theirs as well.
Giselle is really special for me because she's bringing really strong feeling about this. You know, the kind of feminine beauty and sadness together. But Akram give me a feeling that he always wants things to be neutral, to be simple. You know, they want to keep all the language to be movement. So that I understood when I worked with him for so long. The imagination, we always starting to be really numerous and a lot of ideas. But at the end, it must come back to really simple. We just keep that kind of twilight colors on Giselle. So the whole thing is like in the dream, but really simple costume. Because all the language, all the message is from the movement and from the dance. I think just the original Giselle feeling has to be reformed to another dimension.
I believe ensure that these works continue to survive, that they go beyond 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years. They need to be open to new artists. And this is why I want to continue to look at the classical repertoire and reinterpret it, reinvigorate it, and give chances to the artists of today to look at it and, you know, break it apart and put it together in a most wonderful, surprising way.